quiet, numbskulls. I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
Tonight, business side of music, Paul Castoe, special guest here with TSAI. Now, I've got to tell you, up until this last weekend, when I ran into Mark Bernowski, I wasn't even sure what TSAI is.
It's the president of China, too, which is one of our issues on things like search engines and everything else.
When I looked it up, that was like, oh, I think I'm on the wrong page. Anyway, thank you for having us. We're here in Nashville, Tennessee, at the Tennessee Songwriters Association International Headquarters, Music Valley Drive, and I appreciate it. You know, one of the things that we like to do, because our show is called The Business Side of Music, is we want to talk about the business aspects of the music industry. Many artists, singer-songwriters, they love the business, but it's kind of that left brain, right brain, and we talk about that a lot on the show. Very creative people. But when it comes to copyrights, when it comes to protecting your songs, when it comes to how do I get it to the right people, it almost becomes like white noise or just, you know, a test pattern on the TV. They don't really get it. These are some things, you know, I want to talk about with you tonight and see if we can enlighten some people. I'm going to start off with, first of all, I had a conversation last week with a songwriter, great song, who, as I found out, has been handing it out to people and saying, yeah, go ahead and record it. First thing I said was, do you have it copyrighted? And this individual came back and said, no, I don't even know how to copyright. When you're writing a song, what is that very first step, even before you start writing?
Writers will write a song a number of different ways. I mean, I tend to write from a title and then out, you know, which is called write from starting in the middle and working out, you know. So if there's a title, then I say, okay, why am I saying that title? Which means I write the line before that. Okay, then why am I saying that? So I need to write the line before that. I tend to write the chorus and then say, okay, why am I singing this chorus? Well, I need a verse to explain why I'm in this situation. That's how I write. But I know a lot of musicians who exactly the opposite. They just start with an opening line and they don't know where they're going. I have a couple of great songs I wrote with phenomenal musicians that are songwriters that had no idea what the title was going to be, didn't even know where the story was going to go. They just had kind of a cool thing and an opening line, and it's kind of up to me to shuffle them down the right path and end up somewhere where we wanted to go.
You just brought up a topic is if you're not the sole songwriter, there's different co-writes involved. You all need to protect yourselves.
Right.
So when you're in the creative process of writing a song, and maybe you've come up with a chord and somebody else has come up with a line or a word and somebody's come up with a chorus, is that just still split evenly in most cases? I mean, does that become a 50-50 or a 33-33, 33 and a third? How does that typically work?
It's a great question because it's not the same everywhere and there's no actual rule or law about it. In Nashville, because this is such a co-writing, songwriting community, and we're the lifeblood of the industry, and we're certainly the lifeblood of the city, is there's a gentleman's agreement, and it's pretty much the way it's handled. And I guess this goes back to how flexible and loose and everything it used to be. I mean, it used to be, like I said, finish this beer, we'll go out in the parking lot and finish this song kind of thing. But it's not like that anymore. And so you do need to be a little more protected. It's very helpful if you're going to have a songwriting meeting, you know, you're going to get with somebody and we say at 2:00 on Tuesday, we're going to go write a song, you know, or I have an idea, meet me at the office or whatever. Well, you know who's going to be there. You know what's going on. You know how that all works. You should keep track of that and know who was involved and who wasn't involved. A lot of times a musician will come in later, contribute tremendously or maybe just contribute a couple of words, but they're really important words. In Nashville, that gentleman's agreement is divided by however many people are involved. In other words, if I got a great song and I just can't think of that line right before the title, I can't go anywhere with it. If I just hum that line, it's still a totally useless song. So if you come up with a great line for that, and now we have a killer song, you're half. Because where was my song going to go anyway? It wasn't going anywhere.
Right.
So that's how we do it in Nashville, but it's not how it's done in areas like, New York and LA and things. They do get down to counting words and counting syllables and things, and notes and that sort of thing, and try to figure that out. But a lot of that is because it's more about the production. Nashville tends to still be more about the song. So, the producers are generally a larger part of it in places like LA, but no, in Nashville, if you're gonna come here and write a song, basically you should be prepared to share that with whoever you're writing with. And then it doesn't matter. This is the other reason why that's a good thing, is you don't have to argue about the line. I got to keep my line because I got to keep my share. You don't have to do that. If so-and-so has a better line, use the better line.
Right.
And don't worry about who wrote it. Just get the song as good as you can get it, and don't worry about all that stuff.
A buddy of mine who's a record producer out of Los Angeles was on the Pussycat Dolls album.
Oh.
And back in the 90s, and we were talking about that a few months ago over the phone. He said that he was one of 16 songwriters on one song, which was a hit. You divide that up, and there's not a lot of pie left. So the song is written. Then you go into the copyright process. You got to get it protected. And that is not a difficult transaction. It's pretty self-explanatory if you understand the lingo, but you need to go to the Copyright Office, copyright.gov, and get the song copyrighted. All right, song's written, song's copyrighted. Now what do you do with it as a songwriter?
Back up 1 second. There are a few ways of actually getting it copyrighted.
Okay.
You can go through the Library of Congress on the website and do the setup, but there are a couple of services now, and there are some legitimate ones you can find out about that will do that more in bulk.
Okay.
For a little less money than they charge.
Let's talk about that.
For all the names of it, those things are constantly changing, but I would suggest that people kind of look at those because there are some legitimate ones out there, and they do it obviously for a little bit less money and a lot less complication.
And they'll get it done right the first time.
Also remember that, let's say you do co-write with the same people frequently. If me and Joe write a song, and me and Joe write another song, and then we write another song, we can copyright all three of those together as one copyright for one copyright fee. We just have to call it songs that Paul and Joe wrote. And it doesn't matter what we call it, but they will accept that. Even Library of Congress will accept that. So that will save you a lot of money. People do tend to write with the same people most of the time. So a lot of people aren't aware that you don't have to do every song by song by song.
Song's done, copyrighted. What is that next step?
Well, if you're an artist, there's a lot of answers. If you're not an artist,
let's say
there
just
are
the
different
songwriter, because that's really what we have here.
I'm a songwriter, but I don't perform. I'm not an artist. I'm not going to be. It's not an option. But what you want to do is pitch that to other people, right? So, we always do suggest that folks write with up-and-coming artists because then you have an artist for the song, right? Now, even if that artist doesn't want to cut it, they're going to be working as hard as you are to get somebody else to cut it. And they're going to know people you don't know. And those are, that's the networking side that's always good about this is I know the people I know, you know the people you know, and now we know twice as many people. So we can get that song to twice as many places. But you do need to, either pitch it like we do here. We have a meeting in here weekly. A lot of those are pitch nights. So we'll bring an artist or a producer or a record label executive or a song plugger or somebody in, and they're looking for songs for a project, and we sit here and play them songs for 2 hours. And then they take those songs and, spend a little more time, go through them and decide what they want. And if they want to put one on the record, then they get back a hold of us, and then it goes to the next level. But you do have to get that song to the right people, whether it's straight to the artist or the producer or somewhere in their management or something,
Quality of the song, when you are pitching that, it's a demo you're handing them, I suppose, with a lyric sheet. How good of quality does that demo need to be?
Or another great question there's no real answer to because, again...
I'm going to ask those all night, just so you know.
It depends on the song, and what I mean by that is if it's a ballad or really The House That Built Me kind of a song or something, that it's just really about the story, it's really about the lyrics. It's not going to be about the production later, anyway, then a very simple guitar vocal, a very simple piano vocal is more than fine. The record won't get much more than that probably. But then you have other songs that are big dance party kind of numbers or whatever, and they need all that production because the lyrics aren't that serious. It's really more about, the energy that you're creating or the party or whatever it is that's going on. So in those cases, if you think that song needs a full production demo, then if that's the best way to sell it, then that's what you should do. So sometimes you come back to that. You also have the ability, after you've got some cuts and you're taken a lot more seriously and people will listen to everything you've got, a lot of those people will listen to a guitar vocal of a song that needs production because, they either trust you or they know you've been through it before or whatever it is. But it is getting harder and harder to pitch those kind of songs because there's, in most cases, a lot of people in between you and the artist that have to hear that. And a lot of those people aren't producers, and they actually need it to sound like the record. So, the best advice to a writer is when you're doing a demo is if you want to do a full production demo, go ahead and do that. Get your bass, drums, guitar, keys, whatever, fiddle, all of it. But do a acoustic guitar or piano vocal version of that. And most of the time, all you're going to do is back out everything else and then maybe get a guitar player to play a little more melody on a track than would have been otherwise. But that way you have both because, there's no absolute answer to anything. A lot of it depends on who you're pitching it to. If you're pitching it right to a producer, most producers aren't going to want to hear the production. They just want to hear the song. They'll know what they want to do with it. But a lot of times you don't have that opportunity. You're playing it for interns or you're playing it for somebody's assistant's assistant or whatever. So those people tend to need to hear a record.
We're going to take a little break, get a word in for our sponsor, and we'll come back. More conversation with Paul Castoe, who is the president. I didn't say that earlier, but he's the chief cook and bottle washer here. President of TSAI, Tennessee Songwriters Association International.
Hi, this is Steve Jones, co-founder of Beat Chain, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Hi everyone, I'm Larry Butler, and I want to send you a free digital copy of my new book, The Singer-Songwriter Rulebook, 101 Ways to Help You Improve Your Chances of Success. That's right, everything you need to know to launch your career as a singer-songwriter, all based on my 40 years in the live performance arena, and believe me, I've seen it all. In my book, you'll find the 10 things you have to deal with before even thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter performer. You'll also learn about the 5 things every singer-songwriter can do this weekend to make their live show better. 5 things I can guarantee that you are not doing already. Plus, there's tips on songwriting and staging, photo and video shoots, publishing, merch, dozens of other topics. All written for people who don't particularly like to read. And again, it's free. Just go to the Business Side of Music website homepage and look for my book cover. Click on it, and a free digital copy of my book will be yours. I'm Larry Butler, and I approve of this message. Thanks.
Spire Boot Camps is happening at iconic OmniSound Studios in Nashville on March 20th through 22nd. This is a 3-day intensive boot camp for music artists who will receive training from renowned experts such as legendary drummer-speaker Sandy Gennaro, songwriter Benita Hill, vocal coach Robin Earl, producer-songwriter Gary Earl, and business life coach Anita Hodges. Topics will include navigating the music business, songwriting, vocal coaching, producing, music syncs, and more. Go to www.spirebootcamps.com. That's spirebootcamps.com.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in Nashville, Tennessee, here at the Tennessee Songwriters Association International Headquarters, Music Valley in Nashville, Tennessee. Paul Castoe, president of TSAI, is sitting here at the table with me. Thanks for having us here by tonight.
Oh, no, thanks for coming.
We've got a great audience here. Hopefully we can get a little bit of education going. We can learn some things. They can learn some things. I recently saw something that you and I talked about this on the phone briefly. There is now a thing going on, whether it's on Spotify or other musical platforms, where songwriters or artists are now finding out that someone has taken possession of their song and put it under their name and is reaping the rewards of that. Is this something that TSAI or other organizations are aware of? Because it is something that seems to be fairly recent. In fact, what I read, I think it was with Spotify, was 120 some odd cases of different songs being basically leached off whoever owned it and somebody else putting their name to it.
Yeah, sad. I mean, It's hard enough on us already. I mean, there's not enough money left in this business to do anything like that. Streaming itself is something I'd like to talk about as a problem and a potential solution. But there's a story not that long ago I just saw where a musician was unloading his gear in the back of a stage door, and a bum came up, was trying to bump some money off him. He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're a musician. I'll leave you alone." And it's like, you're worse off than I am. Yeah, I mean, that's terrible. Streaming is terrible to begin with. But the concept of streaming was that it was real easy for the general public to just play songs for virtually for free.
Right.
I know that there's a lot of people, 2 generations practically now, that really operate with the belief that music's free. That's obviously not true. How much does it cost to make a demo? How much does it cost to get that artist out on the road to play those songs for you? That's a lot of money. It's not free, and there's no reason to believe it's free. Those mistakes happened 20 years ago with Napster. Everybody in total denial. We were here back then, and the record label executives were all going, "Oh, that's not that big a deal. They can't hurt us. We're Sony, or we're Warner Brothers or whatever. That's just internet stuff. That's not going to hurt us." Well, obviously, that's not true. So streaming in general is a way for the public to get songs for virtually for free. Of course, the people that do the streaming are making money because they do charge a little bit, in the theory that there's however many 100 million people that are doing it, and if they get a couple of bucks from everybody, then they get to make a lot of money. But when you look at the numbers and when you look at the math and when you look at how that applies to songwriters, our royalties are based, and the whole law system of all the royalty system is based on us getting 9.5 cents per copy of a sale of a song. So if an artist cuts a song and I wrote it with the co-writer, we split 9.5 cents. If we have a publisher, we split that with the publisher. So, it's really not that much to begin with. So if you look at the logic behind streaming as it applies to a songwriter, if streaming is replacing the purchase of a song, then that 9.5 cents is being replaced by, right now, 2 10,000ths of a penny. Right? So if you stream a song, you get to hear the song. I get 2 10,000ths of a penny for that.
It literally
instead of you buying it.
Yeah, it literally is. If you have something that streams 1 million times, you as the songwriter get $800 or thereabouts.
Yeah. And how many things would get streamed that many times, right?
Yeah.
So, what I would do, my first solution to this, if you look at this as a business and you look at it as a manufactured product, which it is, and you look at the streaming companies selling a product, which they are, then we should get, I would say, about 3 cents per stream. Because if you're going to buy a song, buy a CD, whatever, 30 times, I mean, every song that's on there, you play that 30 times, that would be 3 cents per stream.
Right.
And I think that's probably high. I think, people buy all kinds of CDs, don't listen to everything 30 times, Some of their favorite songs they do, some songs they listen to 4 or 5 times.
Right.
So I think that's a very conservative average of it being 3 cents as opposed to the 9, So if we got that much out of it, then I think we would be doing a lot better. Now, the streamers will say, well, I can't afford to pay, that much for every stream. And my answer to that is, well, then you don't have a viable business plan. If, what gives you the right to steal your material so that you can lower your overhead, so that you can sell your product for less? I mean, if I was a car manufacturer, that'd be a really sweet deal. I could sell cars for $4,000, because I wouldn't have to pay for my material or my labor or any of the production costs. Why wouldn't I do that? So in what other industry can you do that? What other industry do you not have to pay for your materials?
Even in Hollywood with television and film, they found a way to encrypt the files to at least not make it impossible, but much more difficult to copy. Since as early as I can remember, going back to the 70s when I was in high school, we would basically burn CDs. We'd make mixtapes. You didn't know any better. You'd buy a box of cassettes and you'd make your mixtape and you hand it to your friends. Napster wasn't much different. And what you said about the record labels not being really worried about it, coming from a record label background, I can tell you, we didn't worry about it for about the first year or so. And then all of a sudden we started looking at our bottom line And we are being affected by this. It is definitely taking money out of the record labels' bank accounts. At that point, then you have to get an organization like the RIAA to go after these people that are downloading illegally. And that didn't paint a very good picture for the record industry because, now all of a sudden the governing body's going after 12-year-old kids in Brooklyn or, a young single mother because they didn't know any better. So it's an education process. And that education process, we are behind the ball on that because, as you said, we now have a couple generations out there that don't know any better. Now, how I try to explain it is going into a grocery store. I had a neighbor across the road from me who was a manager at a Kroger. And he said, well, I don't see the problem with just, listening to music on Napster or downloading the songs. I said, fine. Then I want to come into your grocery store and I'm going to grab a grocery card and I'm going to start loading it up with things that I want. And then, oh, yeah, Paul wants a steak or, Tom wants a head of lettuce or whatever it is. And I'm going to put that cart and I'm going to walk out. And he goes, you can't do that. That's shoplifting.
Right.
I said, it's the same thing. It's
exactly the same
what you're doing. But until you can get it into some semblance of where they understand it, and then even though they understand it, they have to realize that there's a value there, then this is just going to continue, right?
You remember the initial conversations and the initial solutions tended to be technology solutions, like you brought up. Well, you can do this and that'll protect us, and you can do that and that'll protect us. Well, technology is not ever going to be the answer because there's a technology to go around that.
Right.
As soon as you can come up with a fence, I can figure out a way to get around it or over it. So technology is not the answer. Education is, and also like you mentioned back when we made 8 tracks and cassette tapes and things, we would buy an album and we'd make our little favorites, but it was me making one. I mean, yeah, how much damage can I really do? Plus I bought the record,
right?
So it's not really that much of an effect. But now a couple of clicks and 40,000 people get a copy of that.
Yeah.
Well, that affects. As far as the education process, I don't know that there's a way to do that because I think those horses have all left the barn. I mean, I don't think that you can explain that well enough to people who don't understand. They're just going to be mad. It's too far gone now to relate it to them. We can remember what it was like and we can say, well, it was like that, it should be this or whatever. But, if you're 15, 18 years old, you never knew what it was like before. I mean, your entire life, music has been free. Now they're just taking it away from you. Now they're just going to be mad. So I don't see that being a solution. I think there are some solutions that would potentially save record labels in a bigger way and some things, because I think you have to start at what people are currently willing to pay for. And things that people do pay for now are concerts. So record labels put all their money behind the concert tour because that's the only place they're getting paid. But I think if cable networks were to, like say a record label was to have a cable channel, they would now own their own content instead of paying somebody else to pay their content. Not only that, but they would get their own ad rates on their own content. If there was a Sony channel and a Warner Brothers channel and they could play their own music and you would be paying them. And if you wanted that on your cable channel, then you could pay for it. And the money would still come back at that point. And I think that would help save the record labels, but it would save them in groups because you're not going to have 35 of those. People aren't going to order all 35 of those channels, But I think if there was a way to put that together, people do still pay their cable bill,
You're almost describing MTV and VH1 back in the day. And why that model went away, I wish someone could explain to me because it was a good way to discover new artists and say, I love this music and, I'm going to go to the concert and I'm going to buy their album. We're going to take another break and come back. Some more conversation with Paul Castoe, president of Tennessee Songwriters Association International, TSAI, here in Nashville, Tennessee.
Hey, this is Zach Farnham with 117 Entertainment, and you're listening to the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Wow, I just joined the Music Starts Here community. This is a truly hidden gem for anyone in the music business. Whether you live in Nashville or anywhere else in the world, Music Starts Here is like a GPS for your music career. This is the place to be if you want to get advice and direction from some seriously talented musical people who have been where you want to go. Music news, events, and a great big community with resources for artists, songwriters, musicians, studio and tech, along with music business advice from pros in the industry, all all on one site? Make sure you get your free profile now. Go to www.musicstartshere.org. That's musicstartshere.org.
Hi, this is Tom Sabella, the creator, founder, and co-producer of the Business Side of Music podcast. It's loyal listeners such as yourself that make our podcast successful. Take the time to sign up for our weekly newsletter. Not only does it contain information on upcoming podcast episodes, but also informative tidbits on the music industry and even bonus items that we give away. All you have to do is sign up at businesssideofmusic.com and we will send you Larry Butler's new singer-songwriter rulebook. That's it. All you have to do is go to businesssideofmusic.com, sign up, and we will send you Larry Butler's new book. Thanks to all our loyal listeners. We love you.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back here at TSAI headquarters. I just love the sound of that. I think that's so cool. It does sound good.
Worldwide
headquarters. That's right. International headquarters. Nashville, Tennessee. Paul Castoe, president of TSAI. One of the conversations that came up during the break, I guess I should say one of the questions that came up was how important is it to be a member of ASCAP or BMI or any other performing rights organization, CSAC, yeah. Somebody in our audience has an answer to that, I guess.
If you want to get paid, you have to be a member. All the performance royalties run through either ASCAP, BMI, or CSAC, and if you get your songs performed, you have to be a member, and you have to have your song registered in order to get paid.
So let me ask you, how do those performing rights organizations, or as we call them, PROs, how do they collect the money? Where does that money come from to pay the songwriter?
Bar that plays music should pay a license fee to BMI, ASCAP, and CSAC. Every radio station pays a fee, a yearly fee, and that money is then allocated to the writers based supposedly on how much their songs get played. So you have a hit song, you get a lot of money.
That's the reporting radio stations compared to all the other radio stations. Right. The reporting radio stations actually keep track of that.
Let's talk about radio for a second, because one of the things that you and I talked about on the phone was the split of, like, say, country music, because we talked about this, that there's obviously there's pop and there's rock and there's jazz and there's Christian. Without them spreading their wings too much, they pretty much cover one umbrella. Country is a whole different animal, because you've got bro country, you've got hip-hop country, you've got traditional country, you've got classic country, and now we've got Americana, which is kind of the catch-all for whatever country is not playing.
Good way to put it, yeah.
And those charts, I mean, don't even get me started on those charts, because you've got charts all over the place, not only Billboard, but you've got the Texas Country Music chart, and you've got the German chart, and you've got, all the others.
Well, see, now you're hitting a real passion of mine, because I have been proposing for a while now, in view of what you're saying, and we can see it all around us, but all the people are complaining, this is country and that's country, or this is hip-hop and that's country, and I like Merle Haggard and I don't like Florida Georgia Line, or I like Florida Georgia Line and I don't like Merle Haggard, or whatever that is. And, of course, there's a lot of music that's considered country music. If the Ken Burns special is a huge, wonderful illustration of that. You could just watch layer after layer after layer of things being added to what was called country music. And, of course, there was little, people complained, okay, Bob Wills, that's not country music. That's Texas swing. All right, now it's country music. Merle Haggard wasn't country music originally. That was a folk guy from California. Well, now he's country music. All of these things keep getting added to country music, and that's a wonderful thing, because that's a lot of really good music. But at this point, and especially after they cross the line into hip-hop, it just doesn't appeal to the same audience. There's always been an outcry, this is too pop, or this is, and then you get more traditional, then you get more pop. There was a big traditional swing back in the early 80s when Randy Travis and some of those folks, brought country back to being more traditional, but they only brought it back from, Barbara Mandrell and Ray Price and people like that. That wasn't really not country, it was just a little poppier. It had some strings in it, and it was fine, but it's still really good music. It was still country. It was, nobody complained about any of that. But there's always been a little bit of a kind of a movement up and down, a little more traditional, a little more poppy, but it never got this poppy before, right, ever. Of course, at this point, it's just a completely different sound. It's a completely different thing. It's called country. It's played on country radio. It's sold by the country, labels. Some of the guys are wearing hats, some of them aren't, it doesn't really matter. So yes, it's country music, but it's not the same country music. And if they split the chart into a pop country chart and a traditional country chart, what that means is that's a totally separate list of radio stations. Radio, again, is not about the music. Radio is about the listeners and the ads. So what are you giving an audience to get a certain audience that will respond to those advertisers? And that's where the line gets drawn. You know, it's not about old or new. It's not about north or south. It's not about any of those things. It's very much about urban and country, though. And you know, there have always been metropolitan country people. You know, Eddie Rabbitt was considered, you know, a certain thing. There's always been these artists that were less country than other artists that were more country, but it was never not country. And it never completely appealed or didn't appeal to the audience. Now we've crossed that line, and I think that the solution would be for two charts, because the current country chart that's on country radio would stay as poppy as they want to get. That's an audience. They like it. They should have it. The advertisers know who their audience is. They know how to gear their ads. They know what to advertise. They know how to make the commercial, and it fits, and it all makes perfect sense. But there should be another chart, another total list of radio stations, reporting stations and everything, that would let the new traditional artists have a chance to get on the chart and move up to number one. And there's a lot of great new traditional country artists. You know, Cody Jinks and Maren Morris and, you know, Sturgill Simpson. There's we could go on and on. There's a bunch. And they're doing good traditional country music that would appeal to that same audience that wants to hear Merle Haggard again, or a Johnny Cash song again, or a Earl Thomas Conley song, or a Janie Fricke song. And then on top of that, there's a huge outcry of how few women are on country radio. And again, if you look at it, everybody's got individual answers. Well, you know, it's a bunch of old white guys and this and that. And radio's always been a bunch of old white guys. Come on, let's be realistic. It's about money, and it's always been about money. It was about money in the 50s. It's no more or less about money now than it ever was. But what it is the audience. And they believe that country radio's geared to basically a 17-year-old girl in St. Louis. And if that's the only person they think is listening to that radio station, then they're playing songs for her. So that's why they got a bunch of guys going, whoa, whoa, girl, you look good in those jeans, because they're all singing to that girl, which is what they think the audience is. The audience can and should be much broader than that.
And it is. It has to be.
We're out here. Everybody else is out here screaming for, why did you take my country away? That would be the answer. I mean, it's about the audience. Radio isn't about the music. It's about who are you playing those songs for and who are we advertising to. And if they split that into two, then frankly, there would be at least half of the artists on traditional country would be female, because these girls are putting out some great traditional country music, and it should be on the radio.
Do you think splitting it in two is enough? You think that would cover it all? Or most of it?
You know, I think that you have to do one before you can do the other, but no, I mean, realistically, you can separate it as far as you want to separate it. Like you said, there's currently an Americana chart. There's a bluegrass chart. There's a Texas chart. There are already charts, but none of them are big enough and popular enough to sustain a national chart that can compete on a full across the country level with reporting stations. But combining them, they could.
How many stations do you think it would take to get something like that started?
Well, started, I think, in the right places, 10. You know, I mean, if you had decent markets where there was 10, even a city smaller than Nashville, most of those cities have at least 2 country radio stations. They're both currently playing the exact same thing. One's Cumulus or one's Clear Channel or whatever.
Right.
But they're playing the exact same thing, and they're fighting over that same demographic and audience. So if the highest rated one stayed put and the second highest rated one changed to the other, then they could be the highest rated one in traditional.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't you want to do that? I mean, that's how you market yourself. You say, we're the number one traditional country station in Des Moines, you know, or whatever. So why wouldn't they do that? That whole audience, you know, would be theirs, and it would play, you know, the top bluegrass songs and the top Americana songs. If you look back at what Billboard did when Billboard was created in the 50s to create a top 40, the initial top 40 came out in 58, I think. What they did then was take the best of the hillbilly chart and the best of, you know, the R&B chart and the best of the pop chart, and they combined them into what they called a top 40 of all of those. Probably half of them were pop, and some of them were hillbilly music, and some of them were R&B music, but that created a top 40. If they applied that same logic today to country music and everything that's not currently on country radio, which would include traditional country and bluegrass and Americana and Christian inspirational and gospel and all these things. All of those things would appeal to the same audience, which is what radio's for. And that would be a very highly rated station.
We just had a question that came in over our Facebook Live. Timothy Blanks asked, something I've been wondering for a while. Is it time for country music to splinter into country pop and traditional country?
Yes. And it's been for a while.
Americana's not covering that.
Well, Americana, like you said, is, first off, there's no definition.
And don't get me wrong, I love Americana. First of all, I love their playlist that it can go 200 songs deep.
Right.
It is kind of the catch-all for what other formats won't play.
It is because, again, bluegrass purists know what bluegrass is and what it isn't, and things are crossing over. That's not bluegrass, it's got drums in it, or whatever. Americana's been around for a long time. Americana's 25 years old probably. But, like you said, now it's a catch-all, and the reason it's a catch-all is because country radio wants to call what they play country. Nothing else is allowed to be called country. So they call everything else Americana. That's their definition. It's not our definition, and it's not Americana's definition, purist or bluegrass, but that definition is theirs. There'll be people who say, well, that's not Americana, that's country. And yeah, you're probably right, but who are you asking? And that's really what that is.
And that's what I wanted to say is I think a lot of what Americana is playing is more country than what country's playing.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what, country radio, I'm sorry, but that ship left the dock a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And I understand that they are trying to feed a certain, so to speak, a certain audience, and not getting into politics, but it's kind of like the flyover states. You got LA and you got New York, but
True.
You got a lot of terra firma in between of a lot of middle America that happens to like a lot of other styles of music. And I think that's one of the reasons that Americana, that genre, that format, that panel, has grown like it has. I remember 15, 20 years ago when Americana took root here in Nashville and had their first convention, it was a few hundred people. We went to it this last fall, and it's tens of thousands of people, and it's stages all over town. And is it as big as CMA Music Fest? No, absolutely not. But it's on the right path.
It's pushing it.
It's pushing it. But I agree. I'd love to see the panel split. I'd love to see two different charts of traditional country because there's a lot of it out there.
The other thing is you say, what is Americana and why is there Americana? The reason there is Americana was because those artists weren't being played on country radio then. I mean, what would the original Americana artists were people like John Mellencamp and Emmylou Harris and Nancy Griffith and that sort of music. That's country music.
Yeah.
But they weren't playing it on country radio then either, so they said, well, I'm taking my ball and go over here.
Yeah.
And they did. It's good music, very successful. People love it. They all had great audiences, and it's obviously surviving really well. It has just always slowly been a collector bin of what country radio doesn't play. You can push off a little farther into bluegrass and very Christian, gospel, inspirational types of things, but Americana is a miscellaneous category, and it always has been.
I don't think those other charts, and nothing against them, I don't think they're as strong as Americana. No. Americana has definitely started something. Do we have any questions? Anybody have any questions?
I myself am an independent artist, songwriter, blah, 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 blah. Hello, Nashville.
I like that. That's good.
What it is.
Yeah.
Literally throw a rock and hit 8 people. So, but like with streaming, social media, all the different ways that songwriters can make money, my question to you, just to play devil's advocate for a second from a younger perspective, but from somebody who did grow up in the social media and the streaming and all of that. I remember when Napster started as a kid, knowing full well it was completely illegal, but still doing it anyway. What is there to say that like the younger generation won't really care about 2 charts? They'll care more about what's on Spotify, what's on Pandora, what's streaming there. And they can just make a playlist of what they want rather than making, like, even adults can do that. I mean, obviously, what's to stop that population in middle America that's paying for Spotify or not paying for Spotify to just make their own playlist and not listen to radio at all?
That's a great question. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is, first of all, we have to fix streaming so that it is more fair to the writers, and that's a problem that needs to be solved anyway. Radio is, and has always been here, to give us the new artists. Cody Jinks' new single should be on the radio. We should get to hear it and go, wow, we really like that guy, And right now it's up to you and everybody else to do that yourself. You have to push your own stuff, give it away, whereas if it was on the radio, you'd be getting a royalty from it, a performance royalty. You might not get a mechanical until somebody buys it, but if there was a radio station playing those songs, those writers would be getting performance royalties, and they should be. And you shouldn't have to give it away like you do now and tell all your friends to go to YouTube.
On the flip side of that, if you started talking about music as though you were a business like you were earlier, What if you started doing more things like YouTube, monetizing it? Like so many people are famous for absolutely nothing now. And it's because of YouTube, Instagram, all those things. And if artists figured out how to do that too, which a lot of them have, they don't need the big radio stations or the big labels or the big publishers to pay for them to do the things. They already have the money.
I want to jump in on that. We have an artist who's going to be on our podcast next week who's done exactly that. Doesn't have a record deal, doesn't have a publishing deal, wrote a song, actually sat down at a piano, wrote a song for his wife for when they got married. He had it performed at their wedding. It's had over 1 million streams. The guy's now doing 90 to 100 dates a year without any effort. So you're absolutely right. There's another machine out there called YouTube, called Facebook. It's all those social media platforms, but you have to know how to use it. And Tom Sabella, our co-producer on the show, spent some time figuring some of this out. And you said what, the algorithms, they change 400 times a year. Keeping up with that in itself is a full-time job. So if you're a singer-songwriter, if you're an aspiring artist, and you're wanting to use that machine, and that's really what it is, it's a big machine to get your music out there, you have to understand that business end of things, along with everything else. Going back to talking about copyrights and protecting yourself. Is my brand trademarked? How am I protected? Because that's what it comes down to in the very end, is being protected, to know that what you have created as that craftsman, you're going to get some monetization for it. And if the only way you can do it is through the social media platform, there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to know how to work it. You have to find those people out there that's what they specialize in. And it's your generation that's figuring that out, because you're the ones that created it.
Yes.
Dale Allen. And I'm at least 2 times as old as Aaron. And I completely agree with her. And I think that you have to understand the old system too. So there's no difference between understanding the social media system and having to understand how do you get your songs to artists under the old system.
I think it's a matter of like reinventing yourself constantly, not like your music and what you're putting out there, reinventing how you're doing it and how you're getting to people. And I know this name is going to be such taboo in this room, but look at Taylor Swift. I mean, she's reinvented herself. How many albums has she had? 8 albums, 9 albums, 7? I don't know. I don't care. She's reinvented herself and how she gets to artists. And she's the reason we all know how to do social media now, obviously, and that's the wheelhouse. But you're right. You do have to understand all of the business side to it, too. Like, this is, like you said, a big, giant machine.
And that's the other thing. You have to treat this as a business from day one going in, because otherwise it's just a hobby. I love doing woodworking. I don't make money at it. It's because I build things for my wife and for the house and for the grandkids and whatever. But it's a hobby. If it was a business, I would take it a lot more seriously. I think that's a problem that a lot of singer-songwriters, aspiring artists don't. So they don't take themselves or their craft serious enough, and they have to.
There's a desperation to get known and to be seen. And like I said, there's thousands and thousands of things uploaded to YouTube every hour. So how do you get to the top of that? Hardly anybody ever will. And again, that's the job that radio can do, is actually expose all of that to people and let the cream rise to the top and give more people a more legitimate chance. Because you can say, well, I recorded this and I put it on YouTube today. Okay, so did 14,000 other people. So nobody's going to hear all of that.
It's a lot of white noise that's out there.
It's a huge amount.
You got to filter through it.
Yeah, a few people will show up at the very top of that. Of course, everybody doesn't have a $4 million head start like Taylor Swift did. You have a lot of other opportunities that come via doing it by radio and by the channels, because those channels are there. And we get into this conversation, and we did because we consider singer-songwriter. Erin writes a song, she records it, she puts it out, it's her song, she gets credit for it. That's wonderful. But if 2 of us are writing a song, getting it to somebody else, who's paying us? We're not performing it. I mean, most of your money still comes from performances. That part of the industry doesn't get paid anymore, and that's another part of the problem, and it's another reason for the condition of the music that we're in too. Countless songwriters have just quit and gone home, said, well, we're not getting paid anymore, so I quit.
Erin, I want to ask you a question. Do you sell product at your shows? Do you have CDs to sell?
Yes.
Is it people still buying it, still viable?
Yes.
Your CD goes for how much with how many songs on it?
$10 for 6 songs. 7.
and you have no problem selling it.
I play a lot of smaller shows where people actually like sit and listen, and then I play the comedic card to make them buy it. I tell them my cat's starving. He needs to eat.
Hey, listen.
True.
Throw something in the tip jar so Wally can eat tonight. It's up to you.
Once again, you're selling products. So
And you're reaching 200 people that night.
You're still selling a physical piece of product. And I'm a big advocate of this because it's an emotional purchase. Someone goes to your show, they like what they see, they're going to buy this so they can take that home and have memories because that's what
a
you
souvenir
created.
as much as it is, the actual purchase.
It's like a
of it,
T-shirt.
which is great, and that's why you do it. But there's more to it, and there are more people involved in the process than that. I guess is a lot of what I'm talking about. All of the other people in the channel aren't getting paid, and radio currently was the only legitimate, large-scale way for those people to get paid. Plus, the fans want to hear it. And the artist shouldn't have to work. I mean, if you do understand social media and you can spend how many hours a day doing your own marketing and doing your own thing with that. But what if you didn't have to? What if you could go write another song? What if you could do what you really want to be doing and not have to spend 3 hours a day on your own social media just to get that far? And that's, again, part of it. Again, those things exist. YouTube exists and streaming exists. I think they should be paying more for what they're getting out of it. But they're not going to go away, and they don't really have to if they would just pay what they should be paying. But that's not an either-or thing. Radio could still be there just as well. And you could hear a new song on radio and go, oh, I'm going to go check him out on YouTube. What we used to do is hear somebody on the radio and go to the record store. Well, now you hear somebody on the radio, you could go find him on whatever, Facebook or YouTube or something. I mean, that would still be there. It doesn't have to be either or. Radio still, would bring a lot of listeners back if there was something that they wanted to listen to.
Hi, Joe DeLucas. I'm also a songwriter in Nashville. Like Aaron said, hello, Nashville. I actually have a point to what Aaron said, and then I want to talk about streaming for a second. Aaron had brought up, why should younger people care about two charts and two things like that? Well, the reason that they should care and that they should exist and like what Paul keeps pushing about two radio stations is because Florida Georgia Line or Kenny Chesney or Blake Shelton come out with an album. It's on the radio like that. Tanya Tucker comes out with an album. Great album. Do they care? Because they're playing Florida Georgia Line, Taylor Swift. But if there's two radio stations and two charts, now you have another station to play that album. And the older people, we have that outlet to choose what we want to listen to. And we don't have to go searching. It was the way you found artists and the way you found out that artists even came out with a new album is because it was played on the radio. But if the radio is not playing it, then you don't have that choice. And you've never heard it. So now you're not going to get, no, Tanya Tucker's Tanya Tucker. That's just an example. She's always going to sell an album, but people have to know about it first.
Yeah, but Tanya Tucker had all but gone away in most people's eyes before that album came out. And then that album came out and was Grammy bound. I mean, you're right. There has to be a way to get that great music out there, and radio's not doing it. No, at least not for the most part.
And even in some cases, new artists, because one of my favorite country artists of all time, I'm going to say her name. She came out in the 90s. No one's ever going to heard of her. Her name is Jenny Simpson. And radio never touched her because she wasn't country enough for country radio, but she was too country for rock radio. So she never got airplay. I happened to meet her at a corporate event, and I saw her play, and she's one of the greatest artists ever. But you don't hear from her because it was all saturated in what they thought the music mold should be.
We always called them hat acts. Here's the hat, slide the artist as long as they fit the hat.
Right.
We never changed the hat. We just changed the artist.
Right. Like Johnny Bravo and You Fit the Suit, right?
Yeah.
From the Brady Bunch. Now, my other point was back to streaming and talking about, why streaming doesn't help the songwriters. I just recently read an article about Peter Frampton. And, Peter Frampton in the 70s had that album, Frame That Comes Alive, came in everybody's mailbox like Valpak. Everybody owned it. 55 million streams of Baby I Come Your Way. He received $1,700. 55 million streams. That's 0.00003 cents per stream. I mean, granted, he made all his money back in the 70s, but still, it's still being streamed. Obviously, people still want it, but he's not getting paid for it anymore.
Imagine if that album had just come out now instead of 1970, whatever.
I mean, 55 million streams of that song. That's 55 million copies, and he gets nothing out of it.
Well, and that's why, people like Taylor and I think Garth and some other people have pulled their stuff off of streaming because they're not getting paid. I mean, she has complete control over what she's writer, the artist, and all of those things. So, and she's putting up her money to do the recording now and all that. So she should be getting paid. Everybody should. What would give them the right to believe that they can take the music and play it and make money off of it and not pay for that? the whole concept of streaming is completely absurd to me as from a manufacturing standpoint, not even as a songwriter.
I think a couple things have to happen here. First of all, the Music Modernization Act passed, but it's still tweaking. It's going to probably be, I'm just going to spitball and say probably another 3 to 5 years before they finally figure out where that needs to land.
And there's no reason for them to push it because the labels gave up on making money and bought into Spotify and Pandora and everything. So they're making their money on the other side of it. So they're not pushing that hard to fix this.
And I think the other thing is with radio, I mean, we all saw the news in the past week where iHeart, talk about a bloodbath and let so many of their employees go. I know that radio will continue to stay out there because it still serves a purpose, especially when it comes to local news and weather and events. But breaking a new artist on radio, I think Aaron said it very eloquently. That's what we have YouTube for now. It's what we have all these other platforms. That's how I think you're going to break the new artist before radio is. Radio's got to really kind of reinvent itself.
Well, it can come back to being what it was a long time ago, which is a lot more local, and then, a regional.
Right, you could be a regional hit.
Yeah, you're a local hit, then you're a
hit,
regional hit, then you're a southeastern United States hit, and then pretty soon you're national. And that's how things were a long time ago, and they can be that way again. Radio can solve that too.
Yeah.
Another question.
My name is Jerry Collins, and I've been around since dirt. I came here in the 60s, early 60s, and in those days...
Your 60s or the 60s?
1960s. In 1963 it was. In those days, a radio station had a program director, and you sent your music to him. He knew what his region, or he thought he knew what his region wanted to hear, and if he thought his listeners liked it, he would preview it. If he got some response, you would be on his station. When we used to have a new release come out, we would mail out 6,000 DJ copies. We'd take bags of records to the post office and mail them every day till every radio station in the United States had one. Some stations play them, some wouldn't. It depended on their locality. But at least there was somebody there to listen to them and decide whether they were played on that station. Nowadays, that does not exist. The decisions to play records is made here when a little group of people meet once a year, and their chain of stations is going to play these 6 artists and just over and over and over. And the business has changed to that extent that you can't get to those people anymore.
Well, corporate radio, as Cumulus and Clear Channel bought up in competition with each other, like became the Lowe's and Home Depot of the radio world, it took that control, regional control away, and those decisions got made in New York, and we can talk about how songs got played and why they got played a certain amount of time. That's another conversation.
Right.
But it was made in New York, and like I said, it wasn't made in what people would like in Ohio and Pennsylvania and Michigan and what other people would like in California, New Mexico, and Arizona, and so forth. But the one good thing about it is, as Cumulus and Clear Channel have their struggles and are selling radio stations back to raise capital to pay interest, now there are more and more independent radio stations in good markets. And again, those are the people that should look around and say, well, if there was a traditional chart, I should be on it. I'm the 3rd-rated country station in Peoria or Orlando or wherever, and that's the one who should change, because then they could be the number one in that genre. And if that genre was created as a full, complete one, then those would be the stations that would jump on it. And of course, the bigger ones would be the reporting stations, and then we'd be right back where we are right now with a complete duplication and a lot more music out there.
I think where radio is going to serve its purpose, I'm going to restate, it's on that local level, but they can be very successful. As you said, you can create that new chart. Aaron said, well, why do we need another chart? Well, it's a way for a local artist to get broken, get exposure that YouTube may or may not do. Because as you said, there's so many different new things. People opening a bottle of ketchup and it gets 1 million views. Heaven knows why, but it does. And yet you have an artist out there who's written a great song who can't get exposure. If you start at the grassroots level, if you start at that very local economy, small town America, and as you said, I remember breaking artists in the Southeast and in the Southwest when I was at the record label, or we'd break them in Canada before we'd take them anywhere else, and you'd have success. And it was a long process. It was sometimes 3 to 6 months, maybe a year before you saw something come from your cultivation. And I think that's where local radio can help get back in that process?
Well, yeah, there's plenty of charts, and there are plenty of stations playing traditional country music, but they are playing older music because they don't know about the new music. You know, I mean, there are stations we talk to people all the time. So there's a station in my town that plays traditional country. They play all kinds of Merle Haggard and Barbara Mandrell and Earl Thomas Conley, but they don't know who Cody Jinks is. And they don't know who Maren Morris is, and they don't know who some of the other new people are because nobody's given them that material. And that's the purpose of a Billboard-recognized national chart. I think the Grammys are an awesome example of why it would work because those folks know what they're doing. I mean, they had a huge award ceremony Sunday. All the traditional country awards were given out in the afternoon before it went on television because that's not what they're there for. Country music in their mind is a peripheral thing like blues or jazz or something like that. So, you know, Tanya's got her award, and I think that's awesome. But at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you know, or whatever, they know that there's a different audience. They know that that music is country, and it's a different audience than the one who's going to be watching television at 9 o'clock at night. They played Luke Bryan and Blake Shelton and stuff at 9 o'clock at night. So they know. And not only that, but if you look at what they did with pop, are you talking about how many charts there are? How many charts are in pop music?
Right.
When you consider rock and heavy metal and every other form of pop music. Well, this year they took what was left after all of that separating. All those things come out. And what was left with pop, they split that in half into traditional pop because they know it's a different audience. Traditional pop can play Alicia Keys and John Legend and Barbra Streisand and people like that who don't have to be hip-hop anymore. You know, if they want on the pop station, they got to be hip-hop enough to get on the pop station. Those folks generally don't do that kind of music. So the Grammys, as smart as they are, they knew to take what was left of pop music after all the other separated categories and cut that in half into pop and traditional pop.
My wife's working with an artist right now by the name of Colby Wyatt out of Florida who's getting airplay in Texas. And he's doing it the very old school traditional way, station by station, sending a CD or sending an MP3 file, and he's getting airplay. And we know he's getting airplay because people are calling, and they're saying, hey, Colby, we just heard your song on the radio. This is great. Get back to what I said originally. You're going to have to start somewhere. There has to be a ground zero, and that's where you begin. How can people find TSAI?
Well, as I said before, if you're not the president of China, you can hit any of your search engines. We do everything we can to get up high enough to stay on that. So you can Google TSAI, Tennessee Songwriters Association, TENN Songwriters.com. Also, you know, Twitter and Facebook and all those kind of things. We're on as much of that as we can do. It's a volunteer organization. You know, none of us are getting paid for any of this, so we're just doing what we can to help. There's a real small membership fee to be a member here, to do some of the things that we do. We help the community in large at, you know, in a lot of ways outside of that. But
and you don't have to be living in Tennessee or living in Nashville to be a member.
No, that I on the end of that means international, and we have members in Canada and South Africa and Europe and Australia and New Zealand and all over the place.
What's the membership per year?
120.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Los Angeles, California and Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Busan.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.